In September of 2020, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention mandated an eviction freeze to help stop the spread of COVID-19. After numerous court battles, the National Eviction Moratorium was overturned, and seniors can once again be kicked out of their homes for non-payment of rent. But is there an eviction freeze still on the books where you live? Hi, I'm Jeff Hoyt, Editor-in-Chief of SeniorLiving.Org. Marco Segura is a staff attorney for the National Housing Law Project, which has been fighting for the rights of tenants for years. In this video, the lawyer will explain the history of the National Eviction Moratorium, how many households are facing eviction, where eviction freezes are still in place, the steps seniors facing eviction should take right away, and how to contact the National Housing Law Project for help. Because I'm in Los Angeles and Marcos is in Fresno, California, we will be conducting the interview via Zoom. Hi, I'm Jeff Hoyt, Editor-in-Chief of SeniorLiving.Org, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Marcos Segura. Marcos is a staff attorney with the National Housing Law Project. Welcome, Marcos.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Good to have you. So let's talk about evictions. So there was a national eviction moratorium, and that prevented renters from being kicked out of their homes, but that ended recently. Can you do a little history about the moratorium?
Sure. So the original moratorium was issued back in September of 2020, and it was supposed to expire at the end of December. However, that initial moratorium got extended several times. The last extension was in June of this year, and it extended the moratorium through the end of July. While that was going on, landlords in Georgia challenged the law. They did it in federal court in the District of Columbia. The judge at the trial court level ruled in favor of the landlords and vacated the moratorium nationwide. It found, the CDC doesn't have the authority to issue this moratorium was the basic finding. But the judge did something very critical. She stayed the decision, meaning that it delayed or prevented the decision from going into effect immediately. And the reason that was done is because, she figured there's going to be some appeals. So let's just let that resolve and end. And then if my decision is upheld, then it goes into effect. And so the landlords obviously didn't like that. They appealed not the merits of the decision, which they won. They appealed the decision to stay or delay the decision from going into effect. That issue eventually made its way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court actually maintained the stay. They decided that it should stay. But Justice Kavanaugh wrote an explanation, and he explained that, it's his opinion that the CDC doesn't have the authority to issue the eviction moratorium, that if the moratorium is extended beyond the end of July without congressional authorization, and the issue is in front of the Supreme Court again, he would vote with the other 4 conservative justices to lift the stay. On August 3rd, Biden administration issues a moratorium again. This one is different than the original. The original was applied nationwide. This new moratorium applied county by county. It only applied to counties with a high infection rate. And the landlords argue that this is not a new or different moratorium. It's just an extension of the old one. So we're in accordance with Justice Kavanaugh's opinion, we're gonna move the court once again, or ask the court once again to lift the stay. And again, it made its way to the Supreme Court. Justice Kavanaugh made good on his warnings, and he voted with the 4 other conservative justices to lift the stay, and that effectively ended the moratorium nationwide. There's still a possibility that the merits of the decision will be appealed, but last I checked, it doesn't look like the government is going to try to do that. So effectively, that moratorium is done. It's dead.
And originally it was the Centers for Disease Control that issued the moratorium based on COVID-19. And when you mentioned high infection rates, you're also talking about the spread of COVID-19, that by evicting people, it could cause the spread of the disease.
That's right. Yeah, there's a law that's been in the book since 1944 that gives the CDC sort of this broad authority to do whatever the agency deems necessary to stop the spread of communicable disease. And that's sort of the basis, but it didn't expressly give them authority for an eviction moratorium. That was the issue. And yes, so they felt, in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19, the original moratorium went into effect, and that was the basis for the second one in August of this year.
And so when the National Eviction Moratorium ended, renters could be kicked out of their homes for non-payment of rent.
Yes, except in those jurisdictions that have some type of protection, a moratorium. And there are, several jurisdictions that have something like that. There are 7 states, the District of Columbia, and 6 cities and counties that have a moratorium that prohibits non-payment of rent evictions, and those moratoriums are still in effect. And I'll just kind of go down the list if that's okay, and just kind of name those jurisdictions so folks have that information. So, we're talking about New Jersey, Illinois, California, again, the District of Columbia, Minnesota, New York State, and New Mexico. And the cities and counties include Los Angeles County, Oakland, California, San Francisco, California, DeKalb County, Georgia, St. Louis, Missouri, and Austin, Texas. And so those are jurisdictions that have a moratorium that predates the CDC's moratorium that is broader and that prohibits non-payment of rent evictions under certain circumstances. And then you have other jurisdictions that have protections that are actually tied to rental assistance. And you have 6 states and 4 cities that have these partial, I call them partial moratoriums. And the protections work slightly differently in these jurisdictions, but generally they do things like prohibit an eviction unless the landlord has applied for rental assistance. It halts evictions if there's a pending rental assistance application. And some jurisdictions actually require a landlord to give notice to a tenant of available rental assistance programs as a condition of being able to pursue an eviction. And so, again, the details vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but that's generally what they do. And those jurisdictions, Jeff, if I can really quickly, are Connecticut, Virginia, Washington State, Oregon, Massachusetts, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Philadelphia, Dallas, Michigan, Maine, and Texas.
So some red states, some blue states, it sounds like, but overall, at least these states are protecting their tenants somewhat, if not completely, as in California, where you said a tenant could not be kicked out today for non-payment of rent.
That's right. California has one of the stronger protections out there. Again, I forget the period of protection, but basically any rent that accrued between, I want to say, March of 2020 and through the end of October of this year, that rent cannot be used as a basis for an eviction for non-payment of rent. The landlord can, of course, pursue that as a debt in small claims or some other collection action, but it cannot serve as a basis for an eviction.
And we know how traumatic eviction can be. Now, with all these moratoriums and semi-moratoriums in certain locales still in place, it may be hard, but a ballpark figure, are we talking about millions of households that may be facing eviction now that the moratorium nationally has been lifted?
Yes. So, there's census data out there, pretty reliable data, even though it's a survey. And so it's just a snapshot of what's happening at any given time. But the census data, reflects that there's at least 10.7 million or so households that are at least 1 month behind in rent. And so the more important question, or the question that's left standing is how many of those individuals that are behind in rent or households will be subject to an eviction. And the estimates for that, vary. I've seen estimates, just under 1 million individuals or households will be evicted. And some estimates, are in the millions. But I think it's pretty safe to say that a significant number of individuals will be evicted as a result of the Supreme Court's decision to effectively end the moratorium, either because or primarily because rental assistance just didn't make it on time to those individuals, and or their landlord refused to participate in the program. As far as I've seen, just about every single rental assistance program requires landlord participation, and some landlords have been reluctant or outright refused to participate for a number of reasons.
Can you give me one of those reasons? Would it be such as a desirable neighborhood where if they evict someone, they might be able to get more rent from the next tenant?
That's right. That's one of the reasons. You have jurisdictions. I am based out of Fresno, California. And in Fresno, California, before the pandemic, you can easily find an apartment for under $1,000. Decent, safe, quiet. And there was a recent LA Times article that talked about how Fresno is the hottest rental market in the country. So now, instead of finding a unit for under $1,000, units are going for between $1,600 and $2,400, right? So in those situations, landlords in those markets, in that type of market, have an incentive to leave rental assistance on the table, because they know that once that person is out, a little upgrade, a little maintenance on the unit, they can rent that unit for, 2, maybe even 3 times the rent before. So in the long run, they're going to make up that rental assistance that they left on the table and then some. So in those situations, it makes financial sense for them to just say, hey, you know what, whatever is being offered, 100% of the rent arrears, whatever the case might be, I'm going to walk away. I'm good. I don't want to take the money.
I see. So from the tenant side, what steps can those people, maybe, like I said, maybe more than 1 million households, but what steps can seniors and other people facing eviction take?
The very first step you should take is reaching out to your local, what they call LSC funded, federally funded free legal services organization. There's one in every county in the country. Really the best way to, if you don't know where it is, to find out where it is, the easiest thing to do is just Google, legal aid or free legal services in X jurisdiction. And it'll either lead you to that agency, or there's also a federal website where you can just type in your zip code, and it'll give you the organization that covers your jurisdiction. So the first step is reach out to that organization, and get in line for services. You have to qualify. You have to, there's income limitations and qualifying factors, but you want to get in the intake system as soon as possible. That puts you in a better position to actually receive legal services. Puts you in a better position for the advocate if you're lucky enough to get a lawyer assigned. Gives more time for that person to build a defense. And if really, rental assistance is an option for you, that legal aid organization should be able to connect you to your local rental assistance program. So again, it's something that you want to do as early as possible in the process, even before, if possible, even before you get formal notice. Because most people know, even before they get a notice from the landlord, that an eviction is coming. And so you want to reach out as soon as possible. In situations where you don't get legal representation because the demand is high and the number of lawyers available to provide free legal representation is very low, if you're not able to get an attorney, my suggestion is find out if there's a moratorium that applies to your jurisdiction. Again, you want to do that ASAP, as soon as you know that there's trouble coming, and figure out what you need to do to avail yourself of those protections. In addition to that, reach out to local organizations, nonprofit organizations, Catholic charities, things of that nature, Salvation Army. Those organizations typically, number one, can connect you to rental assistance if that's an option for you. But they also provide services, have resources available for individuals that are facing an eviction situation. Like, I personally know of some here where I live in the area that provide assistance with moving, or they have some funding available for, first month's rent or possibly a security deposit at a new place.
Right. So it's in the tenant's hands. They should move, like you said, as quickly as they can. Either Google like local legal aid in their jurisdiction, their state, their county, their city, or also they might be able to just Google rental assistance, as well, as there are many programs that are now set up. And you said one of the problems is the money's not being dispersed to the people who need it, but there are some resources available. And I'll put a link under the video for a national link through the Department of Treasury that mentions some of these resources. Now, what about your organization, the National Housing Law Project? Can they help?
Yeah, so we would be, just to explain a little bit about the organization, we advocate for housing rights for low-income tenants and communities. And we also do advocacy around the expansion and preservation of affordable housing, mostly focused on, the big federal housing programs, Section 8, and all the different programs that fall under that banner, the USDA's Rural Development Program, and also the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. And the way that we advocate is we do an array of things. We do policy advocacy, both at the federal and state level, litigation, and we also serve as a support center for advocates on the ground who directly represent individuals facing an eviction, or that file affirmative litigation on behalf of tenants. So that's our primary role. We don't represent or typically assist individual tenants. But if you're having a difficult time, and I get these calls all the time, they can't reach the right person, give us a call. Like that call will be routed to one of us, and we're more than happy to take the time to just connect you with some resources and whatever we can do to make sure that whatever's out there, you connect to it.
Anything else you want to add for tenants who are maybe facing eviction this winter?
No, I just want to reiterate, act as quickly as possible. Keep in mind that there are eviction moratoriums still in place at the local level. You want to make sure that you sort of get a sense of whether that applies to you, and reach out to your local free legal services provider. Do those three things, and you give yourself the best chance to either stave off the eviction or at least mitigate the consequences that typically flow from something like that.
Great. Well, really appreciate the work you do on behalf of housing, and thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.